Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. And if you're joining for the first time, this is part of our e-commerce series for which we meet every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, and we pick one vendor or the solution that we review independently. So for today, we have a very exciting solution called Oracle Commerce. It used to be called Oracle ATG. So we are going to have a lot of fun discussing that. Before we do that, we are going to start with everybody's intros. I am going to start with my intro. If you don't know me, I'm your host and principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP commerce digital transformation consulting firm. On that note, I am going to move to Phil for his intro.
Hi, everybody. Phil Kerper, Managing Director of Ringling Business Solutions. We help senior executive teams align their digital transformation strategy with their core business strategies. And I come to you from a business perspective, more from an IT perspective, and with about 20 plus years in the C-suite and stood up a lot of different e-commerce systems and a lot of ERPs, and looking forward to today's conversation, Sam.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Phil. Robert, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Robert Brown, principal of Robert Brown e-commerce consultancy. I spent 20 years in Fortune 50 e-commerce, and I now provide that to small and medium-sized businesses to help them grow to reach their goals.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Robert. And if you're in the audience and joining for the first time, make sure you guys post your questions and comments. We typically try to cover them during the show. If we run out of time, our panelists are going to make sure that you receive your answers. On that note, I am going to start with quick briefing and the recap of many different products that we have reviewed from Oracle and from the other vendors, and where Oracle Commerce sort of fits in the value chain, where they are overall in the headless journey, and what is their go-to market strategy overall. So I think we have reviewed many different products, and Phil and Robert, you guys can chime in whenever you guys like. So some of the comparable, obviously, for Oracle Commerce is always going to be those enterprise products. That is going to be the best comparison is going to be probably SAP Hybris. From the product architecture perspective, by the way, SAP Hybris is one, but then obviously you have the Salesforce Commerce, which is sort of the newer player. And Robert, since we were discussing this in the pre-show, my understanding of Oracle Commerce is that they have been rated by Gartner for their B2B capabilities. I think they're one of the leaders on their metrics. So in fact, I mean, there was a sort of conversation in social media, okay, why Oracle is rated so high, to be honest, on the B2B, and a lot of agencies that are really big on this whole headless concept. They were saying, hey, you Java guys, you don't know what you are doing, and you shouldn't be rated that high. You don't understand how these newer platform or the headless platforms work overall from the headless perspective. So I had to do my own research as well. In fact, I mean, in understanding where they are. So, Robert, when you look at the overall architecture of SAP Hybris at this point of time, based on the demos that we have available publicly, that still appears very enterprise-centric when you look at the whole build process, okay? So if you, let's say you need to make any sort of changes, you know how Oracle ATG used to work, okay? When you are making a simple HTML change that you need to make in your Java build, and that you need to compile, then it's going to take 15 minutes, and you are probably going to see the change.
So where I have lost, because I hadn't played in the Oracle space for a while, is ATG was the enterprise owned the application. So they hosted the application on one of three platforms, either WebLogic, JBoss, or WebSphere. And so Oracle is making this move to cloud commerce. And so they actually have marketing and demonstrations for their ATG customers saying, hey, now it's time for you to move over to our cloud commerce SaaS solution. And so that is the difference between ATG and cloud commerce. Is cloud commerce is their SaaS solution, and ATG is the self-hosted for the enterprise.
So, Robert, on that comment, my understanding of how Oracle is approaching overall from the infrastructure play perspective, they have been making a lot of comments overall that even the customers who are going to be on their cloud, they are going to get a lot more control that you are probably not going to get with the other cloud vendors. So, obviously, they are actually exposing the same capabilities that you would have had your on-prem IT experience, where you had access to your JBoss, WebLogic, and you could literally build whatever you want and you could expose whatever you want. So in this particular case, when you are going to be seeing these screens, and these screens are really designed for marketers, to be honest, they are not designed for IT people and developers. So all of that is still going to appear as if it's a platform that marketers can manage. But in the background, my understanding is that it still utilizes either WebLogic or JBoss, or probably you have an option. I think I saw somewhere in documentation that you have an option which web server you would like to use to be able to host the platform. So overall, from the architecture perspective, it's still the same. The only difference really is going to be in that they have a lot more control because now it is actually deployed over cloud. So they are trying to provide that control through many different perspectives. For example, you can connect your IDE and you can deploy whatever you want. You also have ability to do sort of the version control, and the version control is going to be very different as well compared to the other platforms that we have seen. In their case, you had sort of access to code, but here it's going to appear as if marketers can actually do version control, and we are going to be reviewing that as well, how Oracle is managing that. So I kind of like the way Oracle Commerce is approaching these things, and we'll review that. Any other comments, guys?
Just to add in, and I usually let you guys do the more technical talk, but I did review the literature on their cloud solution, and they did highlight the fact that you have an option of a fully integrated, you have an option headless, non-integrated, and then you have the hybrid. So they are offering all three of those types of packaging to give you full control of headless and separate the backend with the UI front, and they're advertising that in their literature.
And that is huge when you're going to try to onboard new customers, because quite frankly, as I've said before, there are some shops that are adamant about, we want to maintain control over certain pieces of this. And some are still, for whatever reasons, some are still not comfortable with the entire SaaS concept. And so by offering, take what you want, keep what you want, it's an easier way to onboard more customers.
And they're also saying the headless stuff here, Sam, API first as a philosophy, easy to use REST services. And then they're saying storefront is built in a variety of available scripts. So, it seems like they're trying to, from a technology standpoint, they're trying to appeal to those developers and also appeal to folks that maybe in the enterprise space, but don't want as much of the development work and want more of an integrated solution.
So go ahead, Robert.
So I was looking at, one of the things that you're going to cover here is, the history of ATG, and it was co-founded by Jeet Singh and Joseph Joe, both graduates of MIT. And, one of those little fun facts is when you are a freshman at MIT and you pick the dorm that you're going to go to, they actually build a wooden roller coaster in the quads, and they actually run that in the fall. So when my son was looking at schools, they were very proud of the fact of, one of the bringing students together in terms of their creativity is, yes, we're going to build a roller coaster right here. And, Cornell has a very interesting one where they actually have a phoenix and a dragon fight in the middle of their campus. So gotta love how they try to get these engineering students being creative.
Yeah, amazing example there. Thank you so much, Robert, for that. So, Phil, one of the comment that I wanted to make on your comment related to their claim of headless, and I think they are sort of, gone back and forth in terms of how they define headless. So I was looking at one of the articles from one of their, product leader for Oracle Commerce, and their claim was that they have seen a lot of different trends. They have seen many different versions of headless. Headless is not a new concept. And so I sort of understand where they are coming from, to be honest. Okay. So there is always a very gray line in terms of how you want to implement a concept. So in their case, you may be able to replicate a lot of things that these newer headless platforms are trying to claim these days. There is going to be a very thin line overall in terms of how many different APIs you can call, but you can do a lot more. So we are going to be reviewing all of that in the screen, how these guys are approaching that. In fact, I mean, this is the same argument that we had even in the case of Salesforce. Salesforce B2B solution, that's not headless. They are claiming that they are headless. Sure, B2C solution, yes, they are very React based. And, my take on this is going to be, okay, yes, React is great, but is it the only way to do headless? From the business perspective, if you look at this, then it's going to be a very different perspective. Okay, if you are achieving the similar outcome, then doesn't matter, which approach you are going to take, as long as you are getting the results. So we are definitely going to review that, how Oracle Commerce is approaching that. And I kind of like the way Oracle Commerce is approaching, to be honest. It's not as complicated for your business users, because at the end of the day, what matters is, what is going to be the experience for those business users, because they are the ones who are actually going to be running the campaigns. Yes, the development experience matters as well, and the integration experience matters as well. And there is a little thin line overall in terms of how these guys are approaching versus how the newer platforms are approaching.
I've heard people actually say that one of the reasons why Salesforce bought Demandware is because they needed to compete with Oracle's complete cloud CX solution. So I think Oracle's doing a really good job on trying to lead this pack.
Yeah, I completely agree, guys. And so let's go.
Sam, one more question. Maybe you can help me. I'm just trying to get an understanding of what best to compare these guys to. And so if you look at some of the lists and some of the comparison, I see Magento Enterprise. I see the Shopify Plus potentially. What are a couple of these other ones? I mean, they're the enterprise solutions. Maybe it's probably not BigCommerce, but what would you think are some other ones if a client is looking at this particular solution as a good comparison for them, a good couple of comparisons?
So in my experience, I think the closest comparison always is going to be either SAP Hybris. It's going to be Salesforce Commerce. Magento is fairly enterprisey as well. So most customers that are going to be looking at these platforms, they are probably going to be including all of these in their evaluation. Most likely, they are probably not going to have Shopify Plus, because that is targeted for SMB. They might not have BigCommerce either. They might have solutions like Spryker, and this we are going to confirm on the reviews as well. So typically, if you actually look at any of the review site, the users typically list which other solutions that they had considered. So we have some validation from there as well, what other solutions they have listed. Some users are going to be informed, they are going to be looking at only enterprise solutions because they sort of understand the market. Some people are going to be all over the place. So sometimes you can't trust the reviews. But for the most part, I think the Spryker, SAP Hybris, Salesforce Commerce, Magento, Sitecore, what else am I looking at here, Robert?
Self-build.
Sorry, which one?
Self-build.
Yeah.
Some of them have just completely in-house build systems. I think one of the things that many IT departments do is they actually take a look at the business requirements when they're going to evaluate a new system and try to determine what the cost to maintain, upgrade, and meet the business requirements are going to be, and whether they can deliver that faster, cheaper than going with some platform. It's getting harder and harder for that case to be made, but some are still trying to do it.
And a good self-built system is not necessarily a bad deal. I have one client that has a really cool self-built system in the B2B space, and they were looking at a move to Salesforce, and it's very difficult for them to repeat what they've been able to develop on their self-built system in Salesforce.
Yeah.
Even though Salesforce has a ton of capability, but it is pricey to repeat the bells and whistles if you've taken several years to really do it up.
Exactly, guys. So let's move on to some of these slides. So here, this is a little history about the ATG organization. So I think this confirms what Robert was trying to say in terms of their founders coming from MIT. So here, I think the acquisition was roughly in 2011. That's where they got these capabilities, and they have acquired a lot of different companies to get several capabilities that are going to be part of your e-commerce portfolio. So here they are saying ATG acquired Primus Knowledge Solutions in a disputed acquisition that closed something. So we don't really have the capabilities what they got there as part of that acquisition. Then they are saying ATG completed the integration of Primus applications. So that's the integration of the same platform. Then ATG acquired eStrata, a provider of click-to-call, chat, and call tracking solutions. So overall, from the positioning perspective, I always felt that Oracle's commerce solution was more targeted toward consumers, but they do have very deep B2B capabilities as well. Their capabilities are not going to be as deep as what we saw in the case of Salesforce, because they had very specific industry flavors in their solutions. So I could not see those flavors in Oracle Commerce or ATG, for example. But they have a lot of different features, such as if you talk about their DAM capability is just amazing. One of the best, in my opinion. The way their approval flow is overall for the digital assets, the kind of assets that you can capture as part of that. And typically, the Oracle's market is going to be media, telecom, utility. Those are their core verticals that they really like to target. So obviously, their offerings are going to be slightly more geared towards that. And that probably was the reason why they acquired ATG, because ATG had a lot of these capabilities as well as part of their product line. Now, I think that's obviously this acquisition was significantly expensive. I would say in 2011 they paid roughly what $1 billion. So obviously they must have a lot of customers that Oracle got, and that's why they paid $1 billion, which is a decent acquisition in my opinion. Okay, so now let's look at their overall design. And now, if you are going to look at the dashboard, my folks are going to be comparing this, and they are going to think that, what, this is how my WordPress looks. So what is the difference? But the difference is going to be in the amount of control that you have overall in your development process, the number of sites that you can maintain as part of one platform. So that is going to be one key differentiator, Phil, when you look at the enterprise solution versus the SMB solution. Most of the SMB solutions, sure, you can manage the brands in one instance, but you are probably not going to have as much control. Where, let's say, if I'm publishing one theme to 5 different sites, do I have a centralized control where I can manage that centrally? I can do the preview and then probably publish it. So that's the change control process. It becomes very difficult when you are talking about enterprise web asset, and then you have, let's say 50 people who are part of your development team, and they each are trying to publish the changes. To be honest, I mean, even for our own branding and marketing, we are not e-commerce shop, but even for us it becomes very difficult. Okay, my content team is trying to publish the blog, but the other folks are trying to publish the development changes. So how do we manage the change? So that's where the enterprise capabilities are going to be. And in this particular case, you literally can identify the chain set and the dependencies, and you can literally isolate at what date, what time you need to publish. And by the way, these capabilities are not just going to be your static changes that are going to be part of your website. It's going to be, okay, for this audience, I am publishing this particular change. So that's your digital experience functionality that, okay, you can literally segment each of the visitor that you have on the site, and literally can display each individual component if you want to do that. That's how deep the capabilities are when you talk about the digital experience management capabilities. So in the case of Oracle, that's where their depth is, and you don't really have to have that clunkiness or the complexity of headless in this. This is all built as part of the platform. So here on the left side, I mean, as we can see, this is going to be based on the author. You can, track based on author status. It's going to be areas, different areas that you are trying to publish, whether the change is part of catalog, design, marketing, media. Everything is going to have different level of dependencies and different impact on the site. So that's why it is very important. For example, let's say if you are publishing just a blog post, what can you break? No big deal. If you are going to publish that. But let's say if you are publishing a code change, then you need to be slightly careful. Once you break, how Google works. If you are down for, let's say, a day, Google is going to penalize you significantly, and you can lose substantial amount of traffic. So that's where this control is going to be super handy when you are looking at these platforms. Okay, so this is the whole dependency section, and this is the part that, Robert, if you are tracking this more as the IT manager, in my mind, I would absolutely love this because I don't have to worry about the coding, and I'm still able to manage all of this, whatever I needed as the IT controller, to make sure that my site always stays live and I don't really have any impact on the corporate performance.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the segmentation that you have overall from the scheduling perspective, it's just phenomenal. I have not seen this functionality with most of the platforms that we have reviewed. This is possible when you do the DevOps as part of your development. So, but you need to involve your developers. And sometimes the marketers and the business users, they are not going to have as much insight in terms of what is going in, what is not going in. So you are going to be dependent upon your IT and the developers to find, okay, which changes you would like to publish. But in this particular case, your marketing is able to manage these changes. That's the real differentiation.
And this in particular, this is really important because a lot of people take this for granted, especially when it comes to things like price changes.
Exactly.
A brand may come along and tell a reseller, you know what, we're going to have a discount starting on Monday. And the platform that the reseller is using doesn't have the ability to time the publication of that. And so you may have your manager staying up till 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning to actually publish that. So to be able to schedule this allows more automation and, a higher chance of success.
Could not agree more. Okay, and this is where the real trick is. So we have seen a lot of different discounting rule, and Phil, I think you have had a lot of different commentary around the pricing and discounting, who should be owning the pricing and discounting. But one of the things when you look at the commerce experience, in my mind at least, right, when you are talking about the real digital experience management, when you have your audience, and the A/B testing that you need to do based on your audience and the personas, that functionality has to reside as part of your e-commerce there. So that's where the discounting stacking is going to be really handy. So I completely agree that you need source of authority in your ERP when it comes for your discounting and pricing. But you are not going to have the psychographic data that you are going to have that as part of your e-commerce in your ERP. So discounting and stacking rule, e-commerce has to be the place for that, in my mind. And these guys are able to do really, really granular discounting rule, and you have significant financial control that, okay, once you apply this coupon, you are not going to be able to apply for the next order if you order the same, because how consumers are going to be. I mean, there might be double dipping scenario, and for finance, that's a nightmare to be able to track. Consumers typically are going to try to be creative when they are utilizing these discounts and coupons, and sometimes that could result in the financial implications.
Yeah, I think that I agree with that, Sam, and I think the differentiator is as far as price lists. So the standard pricing that a company's trying to maintain, I still think that tends to be in ERP, and the source of truth is ERP. As far as what you're doing with that, whether it's a list price or whatever your structure is, cost plus or list down, whatever you're doing, as far as then taking that, turning that into a sales price, whether that's with stacking rules on discounts, specials, whatever, or it could be per customer, different types of customer groups getting different types of rules. There's a lot of functionality, like you said, in ERP. You might as well have it there. And then it's the front end is delivering to ERP. Here's what I sold it for? Well, the ERP can't really change that anyways. If you're, first of all, as a customer service, if the customer thinks they bought it for $10.50, you can't charge them 11. Right? It's just not done. And in many countries, that's actually illegal to do that. So you do have to have the source of truth of what the price is on the order is what the commerce system delivers anyway.
Could not agree more, guys. And just one layer that we discussed in the last session as well. I think there is a distinction overall when you look at the pricing functionality, and overall the distinction between your e-commerce as well as ERP functionality is going to be that B2B versus B2C distinction. So here, when you are looking at this data, this is probably going to be B2C experience because you are looking at the consumers, you are not looking at B2B shoppers. So that's also a distinction when you think about the pricing rules. So B2C pricing, in most cases, I think e-commerce platforms are probably better suited for that. When you look at the B2B pricing, maybe probably ERP, but then again, depending upon your business model.
Yeah, and then one other piece of the pie on that is how do you want to be able to report and see and manage discounts? So if the ERP has to know both numbers in order to give you information, and maybe different categories of, was it a discount with a coupon program? Was it a commercial discount? Was it free freight? So there does have to be interaction on information between the two, so that when you're looking at management reports, that you can say, okay, I look at my financials, what is booked in different categories, and allow me to hold budget, hold people accountable, and forecast.
Okay, amazing, guys. So now this is where the real beauty is, in my opinion. And again, a lot of headless folks are going to say that I don't really have control on this process. You can do a lot of things. You can actually, change your JavaScript, CSS. You can do a lot of changes. But obviously, if you are a developer, you are probably not going to like this because you don't have that development experience where you have a lot of control on these things, and you are probably not going to like this editor either because it's not going to be as friendly for the developers, and that's the reason why they don't like it. But you have similar controls available that you are probably going to have as part of headless without actually touching your IT. So I like the way this is done. This is providing the control for both. Marketers have a lot of control that they can change right from here, as well as your developers are going to have control. And by the way, the themes that you are looking at, these are going to be for each of the sites. You can maintain different themes that you would like to publish across the sites centrally. So again, that's a very key piece of functionality. You can clone them so that you are not really putting the duplicate effort there. So I like the way this is done, to be honest. Then typically when you look at, even if you look at, and Phil, I don't know what your experience has been overall when you look at newer tools, and Robert, you as well, obviously. When you look at like Boomi or MuleSoft, they all are going to claim that I can accommodate any technology whatsoever. Okay, you can write any language and I can shove it in my process and that's going to run. But when you are going to use that, what is going to happen is it's going to be a text editor. So I am still not sure, Robert, how as a developer anybody can write a program on a text editor. But here, at least you have some sort of syntaxing going on that you can at least do something. It's not going to be your developer experience overall, but the way Oracle is trying to position this, at least you have some IDE that can understand JavaScript and that can probably allow developers to be able to write. So that's the differentiation between other platforms, which might simply expose a text area that, okay, here is your text area, dump whatever you want, and I should be able to probably execute it. But in this particular case, I think you have a real JavaScript engine that is trying to expose that. Robert?
Yeah, this is why when you're getting developers, you just can't take a developer and move them from one platform to another. They have to have experience in a specific platform and understand the nuances of what works and what doesn't there. Like going back to the previous slide, looking at the different themes, I love the fact that, you're allowed to have the custom themes and the custom CSS to support those themes, but typically that happens by region. So, you're going to have one in the Americas, you're going to have one in Asia. So, having an American developer develop something for an Asian market would not fly because the look and feel just would not be the same of what they're expecting. But, keeping it all in one place certainly makes it a lot simpler.
Yeah, could not agree more. And guys, when you look at these widgets, and I like the way widgets are done. Now my headless colleagues are going to be sort of not liking this, and the reason why they are not going to like this is because it's not going to be as open. So when you are looking at these widgets, you can literally use these widgets for any of the audience. You can compose the commerce experience the way you want on your pages. So you have all of that flexibility available. You also have flexibility available for each of the customer group. Whoever want to see whatever, you can customize all of that. But the real difference between your headless versus this is going to be, in the case of headless, you have developers selling these controls. Okay. In the case of Oracle, the documentation is going to be very close guarded. Okay, only the Oracle ATG developer or the Oracle Commerce developers will be able to develop these assets. It's not going to be the open React community who is going to be developing. So that's where the real differentiation is between your headless experience. In the case of headless experience, these developers are probably going to be, and by the way, I was actually looking at one of the articles from Gartner, and they have identified, what is that called? And Robert, I don't know if you have seen that. It's called e-commerce as a service, or e-commerce composable commerce as a service, something similar, but it's going to be as a service offering that you are offering. So literally you are going to be selling these widgets as your offering, and then you can sort of patch it together and create the commerce experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is where your if you have any sort of server-side extensions, now you might be able to do this even in the case of Shopify. You can probably have your web hooks that you can publish your JSON to any of your downstream systems. You can do that, but again, the editor experience is going to be probably different in my mind. The way Oracle has done it, it's going to have far more customizability overall in terms of what all you can do from the developer perspective as well, right inside the platform. You don't have to open your IDE. So here you have a lot of different apps that you can download, and those are going to be out of the box for your integration as well. And these are server-side extensions that they are talking about, and they have some more tools that you can utilize. So along with your sort of this, I don't know what to call this. This is probably going to be similar to CMS experience when you are utilizing any of the CMS platforms. In the case of CMS, you don't have to worry about code. You can do a lot of changes right inside your CMS, similar to your WooCommerce, WordPress, Shopify does similar things. So here you can do all of that. You are going to have far more control. But let's say if you're a developer and you want to go back and connect your IDE, you can do that as well. Okay, so some more, and this is where the design code utility is going to be. That's the one that is the IDE. So let's say if you want to have developer experience, you have everything downloaded as part of your IDE as well. You can connect. But again, this is not the same as your headless experience, because in the case of headless, everything can be exposed as API. Here you are going to have some limitations. That's going to be my understanding of overall the difference between your headless experience versus this experience. And that's probably the reason the headless people are going to say, you know what, this is very old, I don't like it. Because you just don't have as much room in customizing in what you want. So I think I have one more slide that I am going to show where you have, let's say you have a hook that you can plug in for the approval application. So I don't know if you guys have seen any of the external approval application being used as part of your commerce experience. So Oracle Commerce is providing that hook that if you want to plug in your external application, I am giving you a place. But in the case of composable experience, you can literally provide your hook at any point of time. You can compose any application as part of your experience. You are not going to be as restricted as your Oracle Commerce. So that's the real difference between the real headless versus, some people are not going to call this headless. In my mind, I like this as a business guy, to be honest.
So I want to take a step back because I don't know who the audience is and just make sure that everybody understands the nomenclature that we're utilizing. So when we're talking about webhooks are one-way communication with an application versus an API, which is bidirectional. An IDE is a development platform like Eclipse or NetBeans. And so that's what developers typically code Java in, and then they'll compile that and upload it to the server. And so if we have some non-technical folks listening, that's what we're talking about.
Thank you so much for that clarification, Robert. Just one clarification there overall, on the comment about APIs. So sure, APIs are going to be bi-directional, but the only thing you can do from that is going to be either push or pull. Okay.
Yep.
In the case of webhook, what is going to happen is you have your Shopify, and let's say if you have one of the event called order update. At the order update, you want to send this order object to your downstream application. Your webhook is going to send that, so the control resides inside Shopify. In the case of API, it is going to be either push or pull. But when you have to do that bi-directional communication, okay, and when you are going to have control inside Shopify, that's not possible with these two. And that's where the headless is going to be handy. If you have headless, then you can do bi-directional communication without utilizing a third middleware that is either going to be sucking the information or shoving the information through API.
Good point, Sam.
Okay, so now this is the web API, and by the way, guys, feel free to clarify any of the points, because obviously we get very technical in this. So we want to make sure that the business audience is able to follow along. So here, these are the web APIs. So obviously they are going to have very tight integration with Oracle products. Okay, so with Oracle products, you are probably going to get bi-directional communication. But if you are going to be integrating any third-party product, that's where the challenge is going to be. So if you think this from Oracle's perspective, this is pure gold, because you are providing seamless experience with Oracle products. Customers are going to really enjoy when they are going to be using, let's say, CPQ. And now CPQ and your e-commerce is a very tight integration in general. But now, let's say if you want to utilize a third-party CPQ, for example, let's say if you like Salesforce CPQ, or you have a configurator application that I personally have not seen if the configurator is going to be as strong with Oracle, especially when you talk about manufacturing industries. So it could be very challenging. So now let's say if you are trying to sort of shove in your manufacturing configurator and that you want to utilize as part of your Oracle Commerce, it could be extremely tricky to integrate that. So if you are using all of the Oracle applications, obviously it's going to be very easy. But when you are looking at that composable experience where you can swap out any applications and bring in any other application, that's going to be challenging with this architecture. And that's where headless is going to be slightly more convenient. Okay, guys, so here we have some more settings. Again, this is very you don't have as many settings that you are going to see with some of the other platforms that developers are going to be wanting as part of this. But I kind of like it because you have at least the site, you have different common devices that you are going to be seeing this. So this is still not bad. And overall, the look and feel of Oracle Commerce is far superior than some of the other platforms that I have personally seen. For example, let's say if you compare this with SAP Hybris, it looks very outdated in my mind. So Oracle Commerce is, for some reason, they have done a good job, at least providing the experience as part of the front end application. And you are not going to require as much customization. The sites look better, at least in my experience. This is going to be your catalog experience, and by the way, the whole import-export functionality is really slick. The way they have done this, it's really slick overall. When you are trying to do all of these correlations of your catalog with your products, the whole functionality is very, very smooth. And by the way, the catalogs that you are going to have, it's not just your product catalog that you are uploading on one site. It's going to have far deeper complications when you are going to be looking at your marketplace scenarios or B2B experience, when each of the catalog is going to be associated with the contract, and we are going to be reviewing that on the next slide. So the whole B2B functionality is very complex as well, and manageable and easy. And that's probably the reason why Gartner has rated them for B2B. So we are going to be reviewing that as well. So this is where their architecture is overall. When you look at the way their catalog is affiliated with your price group, and each of these buyers are going to have some sort of approval flow. So they are going to be approved for one catalog. Now, this is very good. If you look at the B2B experience, if you are looking for that punch out experience, okay, so that is going to be really slick in my mind when you are looking at setting up the contract for each of the catalog and for the site. They also have some of the approval flows where and I think that is on the next slide, where once you are assigned to a specific catalog, you are not going to be able to going to be assigned to a next price group, because you want to make sure that a buyer is only approved for one price. So you have all of those controls available as part of your object structure. So this is the comment that I was talking about. So it's saying once a site is assigned to a contract, that site no longer appears as an option. So what they are trying to say is that that particular site is not going to be available for the contract assignment again, meaning you can't assign one contract to multiple sites. And that's a control that you want to have in your B2B commerce experience when you are setting up these algorithms, who to approve for what. Any comments, guys? No? Okay. So this is the place that I was talking about, interfacing the external application. So this is where the external approval application. So I don't know whether these approvals, I have never seen a best of breed application only for approval. Maybe there is one. And I don't know if this is basically talking about integrating with one of the ERP systems, because obviously ERP systems are going to have workflow. So this is a very interesting scenario, but this is the sort of hook that you can provide in your composable experience. So in this particular case, Oracle is able to provide only at this place, and then need to be sort of deliberate about where you can provide these hooks, where you can shove your external application in. In the case of headless, that's not true. You can literally shove it wherever you want. That's the beautiful part about headless.
I don't think enough love is given to workflows.
Yeah. Phil?
I was just going to say in Oracle ERP, on the enterprise ERP, they also have just substantial, really cool functionality in approvals and in if-thens, and it's just really deep. So it looks like a lot of that depth exists on this platform as well. So I don't know if that came along with it when they bought it, or whether they've added along the way, but it's consistent with their other packages.
And just to add some more layers to that comment, Phil, most of the enterprise platforms are going to have very deep approval flow in general. So if a product is going to be designed for the enterprise market, they typically have the approval flow. And the reason why Oracle may have bought this platform is because it was really targeted for that enterprise market. So it was aligned with their acquisition strategy.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But I do think on the approval level, if you compare Oracle with the other enterprise systems, they really do have some great functionality there. It's impressive.
Okay, great comment there. Thank you so much, Phil, for that. So this is the sort of the, I don't know how to define this, and maybe you guys can help me, but this is going to be the whole mixing of the experience, where you can define your audiences, you can define the variance, you can define the start date and end date. So this is the campaign that I'm running as part of your A/B test, and this is the component that I am trying to show to this particular buyer, and after that I don't want this. So you are going to be able to control that experience, and then you are going to get the analytics as well as part of that experience, which I find extremely slick. Okay, so I think we are going to be reviewing API Server Optimizely, and Phil, you have experience with that platform. They have similar control, but this is going to be far more nuanced. The way you can define the audiences, I don't think you can do that in Optimizely. This is going to be slightly more deeper overall in the audience persona. And in my mind, I think this is very comparable with the Salesforce as well. The way Salesforce Einstein is done, they were doing similar things for the audience management perspective, as well as from the AI and recommendation perspective.
Yeah, I agree. This is very impressive compared to the ones you mentioned.
Yeah.
And to put this in perspective, this is, personalization at its best when you're actually controlling not only the product but the experience on page. And that is no small feat. That's not a medium-sized business. That is a truly an enterprise business that has large teams that have been crunching a lot of data and coming up with a lot of analysis and objectives for their target markets. And when you execute this properly, it is effective.
Yeah, and don't leave behind where the work is. This is great functionality, but developing the right content for all of those audiences and making sure the messaging is consistent with the customer journey and experiences, that also is, that to make that work, you got to have a really good team on that.
And Phil, on that comment, I guess that itself is a lot of work. And now, if you have to deal with the technical aspect of the problems as well, it's a nightmare to manage. And this is where Oracle is really good, to be honest. Okay, because this is really easy overall, the way platform is structured and how marketers can really drive these changes the way they want. They don't have to talk to developers. No collaboration required there. Overall, from the technical perspective, at least, yes, the collaboration is going to be required from the content perspective, but at least the technical problems you don't have to worry about.
So implementing this is in case people haven't been paying attention, this now is extremely difficult because of the whole Apple Facebook brouhaha, getting rid of third-party cookies, getting first-party data. It's a lot of sites are dealing with this is you have to be logged in so we know exactly who you are. If you're just anonymously browsing, you're not going to get this kind of experience because the cookies won't exist anymore.
That's a great point. Thank you so much for that, Robert. Yeah, and I don't know,
having the customer represent a journey, right? For example, if you got consumers and maybe pros or something, you can get them to identify who they are by picking a journey. But that still is not nearly as powerful. That's much more generic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Robert, in your experience, have you seen any sort of workaround for that problem? Let's say if you are anonymous, and let's say if I want to identify you, is there a way? Can I get some sort of data and can I use that to identify you without asking you to log in?
So it really depends on what the user allows. Now, some sites are ignoring browser requests to be anonymous, and that's not really cool. They're going to be exposed for that. So if a customer wants to come in as anonymous, there is no workaround at the moment. We are trying to come up with new tools and ways to identify who that customer is, but the anonymous privacy movement is moving extremely fast to continue to build the protections for those who want it. And anybody who wants to protect themselves and not be targeted, you can't ID them.
Yeah, and I don't know if there are going to be any sort of incentives for the companies, and those are the workarounds that I would think that marketers probably will be able to figure out to get that information. Sure, some people are never going to give their information, and you probably don't want to bother them, but
Right.
It's not everyone, I guess. And Phil, I don't know if you have any comment there.
Well, I mean, there's the old-fashioned way. You can see a better discount if you tell us who you are.
Exactly.
That does tend to work.
Exactly.
Or you can, sometimes you can get a subscription to something if you tell us who you are, which I find to be less effective. But to see my best price, if I actually am serious and I got to give them my email, you'll tend to do that.
Well, that's what Amazon has done, right? So if you're on Amazon Prime, they know who you are. They've got your data.
Yeah.
If you've signed up for Treasure Trove and you get your little, daily text message like, get this new product really, really cheap and it's going to sell out really, really quick. You're going to click in and they're going to kind of see the things that you seem to be interested in, so you're exchanging value for information. But at some point, where does that end? When we were talking earlier, this is really geared towards a lot of B2B customers. Those same things don't apply to B2B.
Yeah, Could not agree more. Great commentary there. So, guys, this is the audience, and again, the audience is very granular. In general, the amount of control that you have to build these audiences, and this audience is going to be the layer that you are going to overlay on the controls. So you have a lot of control overall how you are going to be controlling the audience. But obviously, as per Robert's point, if you don't understand who your audience is, then you can't do much. But let's say if you have some sort of motivation, then obviously this is a great deal for marketers. Some comments here from the users, and this is the this is the accounting company, 10,000 employees. So obviously they are going to be very enterprise centric. So they are saying no log access to troubleshoot issues. So this is the consistent trend that I have seen on their documentation, which is not as great, as well as overall the troubleshooting is probably going to be troublesome. So pay attention to that. And again, this is the problem with most enterprise platform. When you are working open source, it's just open world, you have really large community. So that's a real advantage of going for slightly more open headless platform versus going for slightly more enterprise platforms. And here the changing of skins is not easy. So even though our assumption was that you have these themes, you can change the skin, but seems like users are not really agreeing with us. And probably they have some challenges there in terms of the skins. Then you have, this is coming from 2020. This is the retail company, 5,000 to 10,000 employees. Again, very enterprise-centric company, really big. So here they are saying Oracle CX Commerce comes with a developer tool known as the DCU tool, which is very helpful. So developers are actually liking it. Now, some more comments here. It's well suited for businesses who want to or are planning to sell products online. This can include buy online, ship to store. And again, that's where the real trick is. These are the functionality or the trends. If you want to capitalize on that, you need to have really solid architecture and a product like this to be able to implement this. So again, if you are implementing buy online, pick up in store, make sure you really think through your architecture. And they are talking about buy online, ship to home. That's where the real difficulty is. It's very, very, very hard to pull off those architecture.
So in the review, the first one that you read where the guy said changing skins isn't easy. I mean, just going by, his definition, consulting in the finance and accounting. I would not expect somebody in the finance and accounting world to fully understand or be able to manipulate web tools very easily. That's just not their forte. Maybe the marketing group, maybe, IT, but I wouldn't expect finance and accounting.
Completely agree, Robert, with that assessment. Thank you so much for that. Here, now we have digital marketing manager. So let's say what marketing manager is trying to say. So here we have the construction specialties, building materials, 1,000 to 5,000 employees, which is very large as well. Here, initial implementation, by the way, this is where, a lot of people might think this is very business friendly. I should be implement this in 2 weeks, right? But this user is saying that initial implementation is very hard. So to build all of this experience, you still have to go through very thick implementation process. And that's where, Robert, your comment that you have to go through that build, the thick build that you used to do in the world of ATG, that has not gone anywhere. It's just that, when you look at these pretty screens, you are just thinking that it's easy. The implementation is not going to be easy. Once it is implemented, then maintenance may be easier, but the implementation itself is probably not going to be easy. What else? Okay, they are also saying that if an error is made in the initial product definition and hierarchy setup, they live in the instance permanently. Okay, that's now a big red flag for me personally. And most of the e-commerce instances, it's very, very, very hard to sort of roll back that change. And that's where your development platforms are going to be slightly better because they are designed for that version control. In this particular case, controlling that data is going to be extremely difficult because obviously they are trying to get that data integrity. So you get one thing, either you get data integrity or you get flexibility in changing your data. You very rarely get both.
One of the things that I've seen a couple of organizations do is they build very fast, easy, almost out of the box beta solutions for people to test and play with data, structure, organization, reporting, to see how it works. And that's where some of the errors show themselves very, very quickly. And then, then they can go back and take a look at their documentation and their expectations and say, you know what, we thought it was going to be A, but we really need to do B. Let's change this for the real build.
Could not agree more.
Well, and Oracle is at its heart a database company, so it's not real surprising that once they say that that hierarchy is set and the database structure is set, that they're going to be very finicky on letting you unwind that, even if you don't like it after the fact. Just to your point, there's going to be, so it is a path that they choose. But I tell you what, just as to get us going on some summary comments, that I did not think of Oracle as CX Commerce. That wasn't, I knew they had this product, but I didn't think of them. Pretty robust, good product, and definitely aimed at the bigger guys. And I thought that the hybrid thing, and Sam, I always learn a lot technically when I hear you talk about some of the real implications of headless or the different types of ways that some of these things are structured. They seem to strike a pretty good balance. Maybe not all the developers will be happy, and maybe they won't have all the flexibility, but there's also some real ease and structure there for maybe not as much reliance on developers as you also highlighted. But yet, this stands up well in functionality from other products, and it's certainly nice that it's connected to Oracle. Oracle's database connectors and their just structure, their database and their cloud stuff is really good stuff. So nice product.
Robert?
Yeah, I like the product. I like what they're trying to achieve. One of the things that we've been talking about consistently is you've got to have the right team and right expectations in place to successfully develop and deliver any product that you're going to do. You yourself, Sam, having done so many ERPs, you can see the train wreck coming, miles away. And, you warn your clients, no, you really don't want to do that. And occasionally, I'm sure you still get some that stubbornly say, no, this is how we do things. And they rue the day they said that.
Yep. Phil?
Yeah, I would add to that. It's we're kind of combining ERP with the commerce solution on this, but in this particular case, they certainly are in the same sentence. It's not like some of the smaller commerce solutions, like you said, Shopify or places like that they might have a lot of customers, but a lot of that's focused on just a stand-up B2C type solution. This is B2B with also good B2C capabilities and a lot of scalability, and really aimed at a company that wants to connect this to ERP, connect this to the other things they're doing, and really have a scalable solution. So the only negative I see on this is they probably still, if you would compare them with the couple you talked about, the Salesforces of the world that are just so focused on this and always developing more and always gaining functionality. The one thing I might caution folks looking at this on is, if the most important thing you're doing is your commerce solution, is that front end, I'm not sure these guys are best in class, but they're right there and they have a lot of solid capability.
One of the things I think we're always going to see is when you get to this level of competition between, ATG and Demandware and, the other toys, they're always going to have their premier clients that are going to be comparable to yourself. And so you can't say, well, Ford is on them, so I'm GM. I need to be on them. You have to really look at what your requirements are and find the tool that fits your requirements.
And fits your organization, right?
Yep.
Back to the headless conversation, fits how you want to stand this up. And I'm glad that the one review mentioned this is a big project. All right, don't think that just because they say all these tools are there and the widgets are there and everything's there, you can pull it out of an app or whatever the pitch is on some of these. Standing up a good, especially B2B commerce solution is a real project, and it's a real business transformation project as well as IT. And then to maintain it, just with the information, we hit content a little bit. There's a whole nother set of information and maintenance to do on a properly run commerce site. The organization has to be right, but it's a really good point. Like anything else, what's really important and make sure you're identifying the solution that has strengths and what's really important for you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. So we are close to our time now. Any other final commentary before we close? No. All right. So that's a wrap, guys. And my final recommendation is going to be listen to the last comment that Robert made, that your industry functionality still matters, even in the case of your e-commerce. So make sure that you are comparing the solution with the wherever you are in your industry and micro vertical. So make sure you pay attention to that. On that note, if you joined for the first time, this was part of our e-commerce series, for which we meet every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. We review one solution or the vendor independently. So make sure you guys are going to be here next week. We are going to come back with another solution. On that note, thanks everyone for your time and insights tonight.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.